Kaedehara Kazuha, the Canadian Ether. While we meme and joke about this aesthetic choice, what if I told you that every single aspect about Kazuha was carefully manufactured before the game even released? What is the significance of the Maple Leaf and his Anemo vision? Is the release of Kazuha at this moment in the story a simple coincidence? Or is there a deeper connection of what's to come? Just like myself, it's very probable that when you saw Kazuha for the very first time, you probably thought that he's a pyro user rather than an Anemo user. This in part would be because Kazuha's color scheme revolving around the shade of red rather than green, which would fit the color of Anemo a lot better. But if we dive into the rabbit hole once again, the Maple Leaf, which is Kazuha's most prominent aesthetic trait, might have some deeper meaning that connects him to the overall story of the game. Now when we think of the Maple Leaf, 9 times out of 10, the color that you'd picture in your mind would be some shade of red. But we forget that the color of the Maple Leaf is actually green and changes into the shade of red during the season of autumn. Interestingly, throughout Kazuha's description, it mentions autumn several times as if to say he has some connections to this season. Now before I explain what the significance of autumn has in Genshin Impact, this season also causes some peculiar effects on one's emotions, scientifically known as the seasonal affective disorder. The people with these conditions often feel depressed and hopeless at the start of the fall, which continues throughout the winter. A change of perception, if you will. Now what does this change mean for Kazuha and the story of Genshin Impact? The release of Kazuha signifies the beginning of change. Let me explain. Kazuha was born of nobility, but he never cared for such things. He enjoyed peace and always dreamed of traveling as a wanderer throughout the world. When he first took over as the head of the clan, it just so happens that his clan was already on a decline. Coincidentally to Kazuha, this was a breath of fresh air. He could finally do something that he always dreamed of. So, he left on a journey. One summer, Kazuha meets and travels with a merchant who quickly becomes his close friend. After a short while, they go their separate ways, hoping to see each other once again. Immediately following that summer, the region of Inazuma begins the Vision Hunt decree. Being a vision wielder himself, Kazuha goes into hiding, only to find out that his merchant friend, who also had a vision, requested a duel by putting his life on the line. Upon hearing the news, Kazuha rushes to the palace. When he arrived, his friend had already lost his duel against a character named Kujou Sara and was facing divine judgment from Raiden's Shogun herself. Seeing this event unfold in front of his eyes, Kazuha could not bear to watch his friend's hopes and dreams get mounted onto the statue of the thousand-armed, hundred-eyed god. So he retrieves his friend's now inactive vision and escapes. This parting between Kazuha and his friend happens in autumn, immediately following the summer that they had just met. In the aftermath of this event, Kazuha mentions that he no longer likes the rain as he once did as a child. Rain often representing the season of summer, the summer that brings back the memory of his friend, and the following fall which he lost him in the incident. Now to go back to the symbolism of the maple leaf, this change in Kazuha's life reflects the cycle of the maple leaf itself, a green lustrous symbol that became dyed in red in autumn. The happiness of his travel, which ultimately ended in bloodshed. This traumatic experience and the burden that Kazuha now carries also explains why he holds the Anemo vision in the first place. Many people have speculated that the Anemo vision are given to individuals with a specific trait, to people who wants to protect something. While this may sound somewhat reasonable, I want to give a different perspective that not only explains the Anemo vision, but how Kazuha's release could affect the future of the game. The concept of Anemo characters can be described by the following statement. Past burdens that shackles them down, which drives them to a specific goal. Before the release of Kazuha, there were 4 Anemo characters: Jean, Sucrose, Xiao, and Venti. Now of these 4 characters, Xiao and Venti are somewhat of an anomaly. Venti's vision is fake and Xiao's vision is essentially for looks, something that he carries around to fit into humanity's perception to avoid suspicions. After all, Xiao's powers originate from his third eye since he is an Adeptus. Regardless, the concept of burden and shackles still applies to the Anemo characters. The simplest to explain are Jean and Xiao. Burdened by the history of the Gunhilder family, Jean has no choice but to continue her protection duties of Mondstadt. In the case of Xiao, his burdens of the past fighting evil and losing his friends ultimately made him who he is today. Out of responsibility, Xiao continues to go down the path of defeating evil. The story of Sucrose and Venti gets a bit tricky, but the idea is still the same. Sucrose is burdened by a promise she made with her friends. Later, her friends left and never came back. But her promise, which she intends to keep, essentially shackles her down to this day. A promise to search for an undiscovered domain that reflects the pinnacle of perfection. And finally, we have Venti, the Anemo archon that seems to know just about everything. Being an archon and perhaps due to his connection to Celestia, he is burdened with the secrets that he cannot disclose. As I partially mentioned in this video, regardless of what these secrets are, because of his identity as the Anemo Archon, he must continue to push the story forward. Interestingly, the concept of Mondstadt and Barbados' representation of freedom also makes sense when we understand this concept. To break free from the burdens and shackles, a concept that perfectly mirrors the story of Vanessa in the manga as well. As you can see, these four characters all share a very similar pattern with Kazuha, a past burden, a shackle that forces them on a specific path. Now the question is, what is this path that Kazuha is on? From what we can gather from the version 1.6 Midsummer Island Adventure trailer, his goal is to reignite his friend's vision, which has become inactive, and potentially return to Inazuma. As for the details on why he wants to return to Inazuma is yet unclear. But judging by the death of his friend and how he disagrees with the concept of taking away freedom, hopes and dreams due to the Vision Hunt decree, it wouldn't be a surprise if Kazuha wanted to return to either assist in the resistance or seek some kind of closure. Another thing to consider is that Kazuha joined the Crux fleet of Beidou on a temporary basis, suggesting that whatever happens in the story of Kazuha, one way or another, will ultimately lead us into Inazuma for the next part of the story. So, when are we going to Inazuma? By going back to the idea of seasons that I mentioned earlier, I want to cautiously speculate to explain a potential roadmap that MiHoYo has been planning before the game even launched. Genshin Impact officially released on September 28th, the fall of 2020. The Vision Hunt decree, which ultimately ended Kazuha's journey, happened 1 year prior to the start of the game, the fall of 2019. The reason why I even bring this up is the possibility that the season of autumn or fall is a crucial indicator that something may change within the story. The story of Genshin Impact seems to follow a cyclical repetition of seasons represented in the lore of the Prayer's artifacts. Here's a graph representing the timeline since the release of the game, so I can help you better understand. The game releases in fall of 2020. Then we arrive to winter of 2020, representing the unending ice mentioned in the Prayers to Springtime artifact. Later, spring arrives in 2021, reflecting the description of Prayers for Illumination, which mentions the thawing of ice and the first fires. Then into summer of 2021, which is represented by the Prayers for Destiny, an artifact that describes the first falling rain. Again, rain symbolizing the season of summer. Coincidentally, rain that Kazuha now dislikes. A summer bringing back the memories of his friend, only to lose him in the following fall. Now we have the last of the four artifacts, the Prayers of Wisdom, an artifact that represents the season of fall, and it reads, "The waters ran dry as the thunder first pierced the skies. To question eternity was forbidden." Thunder and eternity symbolizing the Archon of Inazuma. Summer, where we are at now, reflecting the lightheartedness of the Golden Apple Archipelago, which we can take as the calm before the storm. Now we are faced with the impending fall of 2021, a season that represents change, all set in place by a burden of Kazuha, which will take all of us into Inazuma, a green maple leaf that will be dyed in red. Is the release of Kazuha in the summer of 2021 purely coincidental? How much of this was planned by MiHoYo since the beginning? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like, consider subscribing, and check out my other videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.